Okay. What do you want to start off with?
Oh, her name and
Well, my mother's maiden name was Mable Grace King. Mable Grace King. And she was musically inclined. She played the piano very well. She also played the violin and other instruments. The we had at the house had guitar and mandolin, and of course the piano was the main one, and we all enjoyed getting around the piano and singing songs, and she'd play the piano and sing with us. And, I guess nearly everyone in our family was a little bit kind of on the musically inclined side, and we all played some kind of instrument. And I never did get too good at anything, but I did play the guitar, and I picked out tunes on the piano. But my mother was musically inclined, and she liked for us to come around the piano and play the piano. She chose how to play different chords so we could sing, and just play the chords for the bass. And she taught piano for several other people, members of other families. But she was a very busy lady because we had 7 brothers and sisters in our family. I was the first male born in the family, and then the last one was my brother Maury, who was born 8 years later. And but I was always out helping my dad with whatever he was doing. Sometimes he'd assign me a job, and I'd do that by myself. And I'd always, when I had to go get something from the shop, some tool of some kind, I'd always run. And I was pretty agile. I'd jump fences instead of going down to the gate. I'd just go straight, jump the fences. And of course, when I went to school, I took part in the athletic program for the county meets and all. We did some pretty good stuff. We brought in a lot of blue ribbons. And Mom taught us all she could, but she was mostly in the house, and so when it came to doing the outside work, well, we were always pretty busy doing that. And she kind of keep an eye on us. And I had 2 sisters that were younger than me that got very delightful glee out of seeing my mama paddle my butt with a hairbrush. It wasn't a very big one. It had a round brush part on it. And she took it by the handle, and that thing, about the 3rd lick, that thing grew up to about 12 inches across. It burnt my tail pretty good. But anyway, I got along pretty good with Mom. She would sometimes make, I call it a mistake, by letting the 2 little sisters I had that were younger than me tell some kind of yarn about what I did that I hadn't done, and like tearing up their playhouse and stuff like that. They got a delight in seeing Mother grab that hairbrush and come after me. So I got to where I had to defend myself, and I was innocent. I hadn't done a thing. And they'd go tell Mama a story about how I tore up the dollhouse. So after a while, I took a few spankings with being innocent, but after a while I decided I wasn't going to take any more spankings when I was innocent. So I would outrun my mama, and she would get pretty mad. But I'd go do something else and get away, clear away from the two sisters, because they were kind of cruel to me. They liked to see me get whipped. But Mom took good care of all of us. She was always up at night with us when we were sick with colds and stuff. She was a pretty good doctor too. She put, when we had chest colds, and she was always afraid of turning into pneumonia. She fixed a big poultice, it would put it on my back, maybe on my chest, and heat it and ward off a lot of problems that would come if we didn't do that. But she was very good with us kids. She even went to the cow pen and milked cows with us. And so Dad let us go ahead and run the milk through the separator and sew the cream in a 5-gallon can. And have them make the check out to her when they mailed it to her. So she had a little spending money for Christmas, odds and ends. She was a very good cook. She could go in the kitchen and it'd be smelling real good in there pretty quick. She'd feed us a meal that would be healthy and everything for us. I never did have to eat anything that I didn't like because I was always pretty hungry. But anyway, she was a very good mom. She tried to teach us all to play the piano, but I guess I'm no different from a lot of kids. I didn't like the idea of going in there and sitting on a bench and playing the piano. It was a kind of a sissy thing, the way I looked at it. And she didn't fuss at us too much, but she finally would think up some kind of a way, a game or something that we could use the piano and play. And she was very good at that. And when we took a long trip to see my grandma on my father's side up in Austin, she and the oldest sister, two of them, would have me go out in the yard and catch 2 or 3 frying-sized chickens and wring their necks, and they would dip them in hot water and pick them, and then they'd cut them up, fry all that chicken, and put it in an old shoebox with some bread, and we'd put it in the car when we left home to go to Austin. That was a whole day's trip. We drove all day long. So when mealtime came, we just opened the shoebox and ate the chicken. And we didn't take water or anything. We always took milk because we ate milk cow. We were pretty good, pretty well nourished all the time. She never let us down on the food. And I remember her father, who's my grandfather, he had a heart attack, and they got mother, and her younger sister was already had passed away, so they'd take Mom up there, and she'd rub my grandfather's arms and maybe put him through a heart attack sometimes, but then again, she finally had to give up one night. He died. I believe it was 1927. I think he was 71 years old when he passed away. And I was pretty young. I had a lot of fun with my grandfather. I sure did miss him when he passed away. But his grandmother died long before he did. So he was left a bachelor there in Seguin. And he'd come down and stay stay with us and have all kinds of fun. And my mother treated all of us very much alike, except, like I said a while ago, I was always accused of doing a lot of things that I hadn't done. My little sisters were really getting a lot of good out of seeing my mama take that paddle after me, that old hairbrush. So I could run, I could outrun her, and then I wouldn't have any problem. If they told a story on me, I didn't hesitate, I'd run. I wouldn't take a whippy. Yeah, but anyway, on late evenings or Sundays, while everybody was going to church, I'd go out and ride to milk calves. And a lot of times Mom would come home and I'd be out there at the water trough washing off my shirt. It got pitched off in the cow pile out there and got it all over my shirt. It would be green. And I thought I had it out because I was colorblind. I couldn't see it. I washed it real good and hung it up to dry. Mom would see that shirt when I brought it in. She says, been riding the calves again, I see. Big green spots all over my shirt. But anyway, she was always trying to entertain the family. We'd go on picnics down to an old pond down north of the house, and she and her sister, Aunt Ludy Kempsel, would take a newspaper and fold it in such a way that it made a little boat. We got a big kick out of sailing that little boat. The wind would blow it for us. We'd get it when it got to the end of the trail. We'd pick it up and run all the way back up to the end before the wind would blow it again. So we had a lot of fun. And Mother was good at entertaining the kids. And when I was growing up, I had a tendency to get hurt every once in a while, and I would ride horses in the brush and the pasture, but rounding up cattle or horses and mules, and a lot of times I'd get up pretty bad on mesquite tree limbs. I couldn't duck down low enough. And one time I got some teeth knocked loose. I hit a big stop that had been broken off, and I hadn't seen it. And then when I was down with my head, and I raised up just in time to catch the end of that stop, right in the mouth, and it knocked my teeth loose, and I had a big bloody nose and lip and everything. My mother said, "Why do you do this?" I said, "Well, I was trying to get the horses in." She'd say, "Well, you just have to get somebody else to. I'm not going to fix your face up anymore. You've been torn up so many times it looks like a patch quilt." But anyway, I got all my fun when I was growing up, and I may have regretted it a whole lot sometimes, but I didn't want to start school one year in September. Two other boys and I got together and we ran off from home. And they wouldn't get on the freight train to ride from one town to another because they said that the engineer was looking at us, and he'd be a half mile down the tracks. And I told him, he's not going to get off of that engine and come all the way down here. Get on the train. I'm tired of walking. And finally one day they wouldn't get on. I just went ahead and got on the train when he pulled out. I stayed and watched and about 50 cars had passed them. Well, they ran and jumped on. But that particular time, I never got to see them again. They got off, getting into the edge of San Antonio. There was a circus there, and they jumped off. I could see the circus, but the bend in the tracks made it to where when they got off, I couldn't see them. And so they stayed there. Well, I went on and I was gone for a couple of months. I got a job in Dallas driving a little truck that had it carried bundles of newspapers from the Dallas News Journal, I think they called it, and I'd make a run to Fort Worth twice a week. And I took some other odd routes too, but I was 16, and one day the old cop that I'd seen every day, he said, "How old are you?" I said, "I'm 16. And he said, "You're not a bit older than 14. So of course you don't carry a driver's license or anything like that. So I had no written proof, you know. And I was scared to death he was going to take me and get in touch with my dad, but I knew he didn't know where to get in touch with him, so I just toughed it out, and I stayed in Dallas about 2 months, working, driving that truck, and then he had to go to Arkansas and tend to his grandmother's business down up there, and they went with him. They went on the train. No, they went in the Model A Ford. Drove all the way up there and back. And when he came back through Dallas, I had written a letter to J.B. Brooks, my friend, and Richard Smith was working in the storefront, Judge and Epping in the post office. He intercepted my letter and gave it to my dad. So my dad knew I was in Dallas. And I guess it's a large way of handling things, but you can imagine Dallas is how big it is, and how hard it would be to find somebody if you didn't know exactly their address and all. So I didn't put an address, return address on the letter. I just put the Dallas News and Journal address for the room where a lot of the paper salesmen stayed there. But Dad found me when he came back from Arkansas that time. He just happened, when he got out, the Model A Ford, Aunt Mary and Katie and grandmother stayed in the car. And he walked down the street and ran right into me. And I was kind of happy seeing him anyway. He said, was that all the clothes you got? I said, "No, I got some clothes." And no, he said, "Well, just forget them. Come on down here and I'll buy you a suit." He went down there and bought a white shirt and a suit, pants and coat. And I put it on, went to see Grandma and them. They looked at me, my, you got fancy clothes. I pointed to Bubba and I said, "Daddy bought them for me." He wouldn't let me bring mine. Anyway, I got back home pretty quick that way. He came right on home, driving that Model A Ford. And all the way home, I had two old aunts. I had those two aunts in the car, and they snubbed me, and they turned their nose up and looked down their nose at me like I was a little tramp or something. Kind of hurt my feelings, but that was what I thought. They didn't do that. They didn't think about me as a tramp, but they was thinking about me as a long lost kid. We got home, and my dad told me, he said, "I guess I got kind of rough with you. I didn't like for you to smoke. And your love of smoking cigarettes made you run off from home. I'm going to ask you, just don't light cigarettes in front of me or around me. You can go ahead and smoke if you want to. So we got that settled. But I went right on to work. I was eager to break horses anyway. Put harness on them, hitch them to a wagon. One wild one and one real gentle old mule, we call him Fontaine, because he just kind of stand still when they were doing all their pitching and kicking around over there until the man that was holding the snub rope would get them quieted down, and then we'd move on and get them to where they'd walk and pull the wagon with the harness. Yeah, we did mules that way too, and then we had some real nice horses, and I broke those horses to saddle, to ride with saddle. And I really enjoyed it because my dad told us not to let the horse pitch because he didn't want them to learn how. He said if you don't let them pitch, they don't know how. So sure enough, it proved that he was right. We'd hold their reins real tight and not let them get their head down. His horse has to have his head down to pitch. And sometimes they pitched a couple of jumps, but we never let them pitch. Just like we do it in a rodeo. We'd hold their head up and have a snub rope on them. Somebody with a snub rope is running along beside the horse was riding, and keep them from going too fast or something. But we broke a lot of horses after that. But my mother always wanted to take good care of me because I always came in with a tear. I had a hide torn loose somewhere or a stob stuck in me. Riding in the brush, you get hurt a lot. And when I hit that stob with my mouth crunched like that, it hit my teeth in front and just caved them in a little bit. And I reached in my mouth and pulled them, pushed on the upper part of the roof of my mouth. So I got the teeth back in shape where they belong, and I took my little handkerchief and folded it like a three-cornered diaper. I stuffed it in my mouth and bit down on it and held it tight for hours. I didn't even drink water. I just but my nose and everything was so sore, I couldn't hardly stand to touch it, you know. I couldn't eat, so they made me soup all the time. That's maybe the reason why I like soup so much. I should have been burned out on it, but I didn't. I love soup, so I guess I've got a habit of drinking soup for a meal. I like soup anyway. But anyway, I come in the house and Mama just take a quick glance, see if I was bleeding anywhere. She said we had cut some steer's horns off, and they squirt little streams of blood out of those horns. I got some of that on my shirt. And I never will forget my mother. She ran and jerked that shirt off. I said, "What's the matter, Mom?" She said, "Where's the blood come from?" I said, "It came from that old steer out there. We cut his horns off." And she, "Oh, goodness, I'm glad that was what it was. You got blood all over you." But anyway, we worked cattle all the time and got skinned up a lot, so she was looking for the worst. But anyway, I enjoyed the way she treated me all my life. She was a loving mother. She loved me. Mean as I was, sometimes she still put her arms around me. And I never will forget when I was 14 years old. it was on a Friday night that a preacher named Claude Keeney was a local family that he turned out to be a preacher. And he delivered a real good sermon that night. And so I went down the aisle and accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior and got baptized into the Baptist church. And I never will forget the hug I got from my mother. When she came down the aisle to shake my hand, she hugged me. I never will forget that. That was a wonderful feeling. And I was pleasing her. And she was always faithful to the family. And she was a good Christian. And she believed in feeding the hungry, clothing the people that didn't have money to buy clothes with, and she took scraps and make something fit the little children or something, you know. She was a good seamstress. Had an old Singer sewing machine that she pedaled it with her feet, made it sew. I used to, when I was real little, I'd get under that sewing machine with a little board that I drove a nail in the crossways and slipped a spool over it, and then I'd hold that spool against that belt that turned the wheels on the sewing machine. Mama would be pedaling, and I'd hold that up there and let it touch that belt, and it'd just spin that wheel. I had mechanical-minded kid, I guess, from the day one. I was always messing around making something that would work, you know. In fact, my dad refused to buy me a bicycle. And the boys my age, we all raised hog for the ag class. And my hog won first prize. And then he won first prize over the daily school boys, too. So the men in Dilly said he said these Dilly boys have got to have their show and let that boy, and then they have their show. We don't mix them up, because it turned out that my hog was over there, so I got first prize on the whole pen first. And then some of the Dilly men said, well, we can't let this go this way because this guy's from another school. So these boys from the daily school have to be graded separately. So my dad decided that wouldn't be fair, but he wouldn't contest them. What he did, he went up to the judges, the podium up there, and he said, this is the prize money for the hog that won first prize. Put $20 in it. That was a lot of money. Anyway, I won $20, and I thought, man, I can get me a bicycle. All those other boys sold their hogs and bought a bicycle with them. And my dad wouldn't let me. He said, no, son, you don't want a bicycle. You've got horses out there in that pen that kids would really be proud to have. And I think you ought to put your saddle on one of those and claim him, and I'll give him to you. Well, I rode horses every day, daylight to dark, so it wasn't giving me anything that I wanted. You know, I wanted that bicycle like the kids did. They got there. So I went out to the blacksmith shop and got some old iron wheels off of some of the planters out there, horse-drawn implements. And I got real busy and I built me a bicycle. But I didn't have any way to make a good connection with my pedals because I didn't use a chain. I just went through a hub of a big wheel with, I drove this wooden block in it. It was round and it fit real tight, so then I drove a piece of iron into one side and then I bent it down and out and made a pedal out there. And I took the other side, and drove one end, that one, and made it the opposite. So it would be, and I got on that thing and rode it. And